Hello and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about the classical world, books, and today, The Great Gatsby. My name is Thomas Magby. I am joined as always by Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Hello.
And Mr. AJ Hannenberg.
That is me.
Now, AJ came into this episode with a lot of strong confidence. He feels really good about this episode. What was your exact phrase of how you feel this is going to go?
I don't know how this is going to go.
We'll see how this goes.
We'll see how this goes.
Now, what percent of episodes do you think between the three of us, like that's the...
85%.
85%, yeah, that's exactly right. So...
That's how we
feel going into it. So, listener, you tell us how you feel about 85% of our podcasts.
Well, sometimes I go in feeling fairly confident, like I've read and researched a book, and then we get comments about how I have no idea what I'm talking about.
That's exactly right.
A la the Master and Margarita.
Never happened.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
YouTube is really fun. It's just really great to have YouTube comments on our videos. It's great.
So we remind the listeners that we're generalists. We're coming to these things with new eyes. Some of them we've studied at length for 16 years. Some of them, some
of them not.
We haven't. And so, yeah. So we hear from educators who have been teaching them for 16 years, and they let us know that we're doofuses.
Yeah, post your podcast in the show notes of your episode.
Show us how much better you are. Yeah. All right.
Anyway, I had the same experience because I just reread, I think the last time I read it was in college sometime, but I reread The Great Gatsby. And I was like, okay, feeling okay. And then I went and talked to one of the teachers here at our school, Catherine Ball, and she says, "What are you feeling?" I said, "It's about money." And she said, she goes, oh, okay. And then told me all of the things in the book that I was missing. And I said, wow, okay, I'm a doofus. Anyway, that's kind of why I feel I don't know how this is going to go because I just feel inadequate as I do to much of the literature we tackle. But at least I talked to an expert.
You look great.
Thanks, Graham, which is so useful on a podcast.
Yeah.
It's the best possible thing I can be.
This will eventually get posted to YouTube.
That's right.
Years from now, but at some point it will be posted to YouTube.
That's true.
We're a little behind on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm wearing a short sleeve button up, which I'm still not used to. I always used to hate these, but I'm getting used to it.
Good.
We'll see.
You look sharp. You look great.
Thanks.
Listening audience, believe us. AJ looks great.
I think in my head I'm 20.
Okay.
But I'm almost 40, and so I'm trying to like shift that self perspective. Anyway,
I always thought like the short sleeve button up was like a Mormon look.
Oh,
really?
Maybe.
Now I feel better about it.
I was like, why?
I guess.
Graham, why is that the thing you say right now?
I'm wearing a short sleeve button up.
Thanks.
The man's already not feeling good about the episode.
Now I feel at home, I suppose.
Okay, awesome.
My word.
Hey, tell me more about this Gatsby guy.
Okay, The Great Gatsby.
Is he okay? Is he great?
It's a 1925 novel by American writer F. Scott Fitzgerald, set during the Jazz Age, which, as far as I know, was a term that he coined, which is kind of fun. Cool. So,
it's a fun age.
if you are a young student coming here because you've just been assigned The Great Gatsby, or a listener who likes to hear a little bit about the book before diving in but don't like spoilers, this is not the episode for you.
Sure.
You need to wait until you've read the book and then come back, or just be cool with me spoiling some things, because I'm going to read sections from the book, including the very last page of the book, and if that is something that drives you crazy, don't hang out.
Yeah, but just be cool.
Be cool.
Yeah, be cool.
Good advice.
Most of these things I feel cool spoiling them because they're 2,000 years old and that's on you. This one, it's only about 100 years old, and it's more of a novel that has twists and turns than it is something like The Republic. Anyway, so spoilers are coming. Just a heads up. All right,
this feels like one that's pretty common to be assigned in high school.
Right.
Like a lot of people have read this book.
Yeah,
at some
a lot
point,
have read it, but we also have high school listeners, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't want them to come and then get mad because I spoil all the things, because I'm definitely going to spoil all the things.
Incredible.
Okay, so at some point, I'm going to ask you two gents to read. You have a script in front of you. Well, my posture is way too high right now. I got to read my... Okay, there we go. All right, I'm going to be reading from my book on occasion, so it might take me small seconds to find the exact quote because I've just noted the page numbers. But I'm going to give you kind of a long overview of the plot and what happens in it, and then kind of highlight some of the things that a gentle and charitable Catherine Ball was willing to tell me about this book that now I'm going to claim are entirely my idea.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so the narrator of this book is a fellow named Nick Carraway. He is a guy trying to get into the bond business, and his family has been well off for 3 generations, and who, legend has it, are descended from some dukes. So he has money, and that is going to become evident in the way that he interacts with women, in the way that he interacts with Gatsby and the other characters of the novel, because there will be occasionally temptations to get into sort of dark dealings I'm not going to go over this much in my summary, but he'll be asked to do things that are shady, and he just goes, nah, because he doesn't
need to.
He doesn't need to. He doesn't need the cash. He'll pass judgment on people. He'll treat women kind of offhandedly and discard them. Nick is not necessarily a great
What about
person.
that girl that plays tennis?
You mean golf?
No, the tennis girl.
Golf girl.
Oh, is it a golf girl?
It's a golf girl.
Oh,
Yeah,
I thought he likes her.
he likes her, but then he just kind of offhand dismisses her over a phone call. I mean, it's after a tragedy, but he said, I just can't talk to you today, and doesn't seem to have concern much for her feelings. This kind of thing happens with Nick. He's not a terrible guy. He's not a great guy. He's just sort of right down the middle, not worried about anything because he has cash, right? He rents a house for the summer, and it's in a place, there's East Egg and West Egg. I forget which he's on. I think West Egg. But he is kind of across the way from Daisy's house. And Daisy is his second cousin. And so he gets invited one evening to go and hang out.
This is Long Island. Long Island.
Long Island. Yeah. They're all, Long Island. So he's in this kind of nice house, and he goes to visit Daisy, his second cousin. She is married to a guy named Tom, who used to be, imagine the successful college quarterback. This is this guy. He's large. He's physically imposing.
Oh, what's his last name? Tom. Don't tell me. I can't remember.
Rhymes with Shmukanen.
Oh, Buchanan.
Yeah, Tom
Buchanan. That's right.
Okay, so of Tom, Nick says he would drift on forever, seeking a little wistfully for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. So he is kind of just always looking for maybe just the turmoil, right? That's kind of what he wants.
He was the man. He was the quarterback in college.
Dramatic turbulence is, I think, kind of what he goes for.
He just hasn't accomplished anything since
then. Yeah, and he married the girl, and the rich girl.
He
with
married
the
girl,
hair
and he they both have lots of money.
Now they're just farting around in Long Island.
Exactly.
They have a kid, if I remember correctly. Daisy has a child that she doesn't talk about.
Well, she doesn't really much talk about her kid. She does on occasion, but she usually just trots him out to meet a guest, and then he runs back off with the housekeeper. I think we actually see her kid twice in the novel. He sort of comes out, and she's like, "Isn't he pretty? Okay, off you go." And then he runs back and disappears again. Yeah. Just kind of tragic. In this first chapter, Nick goes over to have sort of tea with them. He meets this woman, Jordan, who is a beautiful, beautiful golfer. She's professional. She's pretty well known. She's sort of no nonsense and also a terrible driver. And while they're there, we can tell that there are some tensions going on in the house. And eventually, Nick and Daisy go out on the veranda, and we find out that Tom has this other woman. And Daisy knows about it. It's just sort of common knowledge. She sort of gives this kind of sad little sob story. It's not long. It's weird. She just sort of says this is the thing that's happening. Talks a little bit about their kid. Says some other things like, "I hope she'll be a beautiful fool." That's what's. I said I'd hope she'd be a beautiful fool. That's kind of what the best thing in the world for a girl to be. Tom comes out and he says, "Did you guys have a talk on the veranda?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Don't believe everything you hear," and then kind of wanders off. So we know there are marital tensions there. They're still married. It's weird. They all kind of drink, and there's just this turbulence running under the surface.
Yeah, it's rich people marriage.
We'll come back to that. Okay, and I want to read a small section about her voice. I looked back at my cousin, who began to ask me questions in her low, thrilling voice. It was the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down, as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Her face was sad and lovely, with bright things in it. Bright eyes and a bright, passionate mouth. But there was an excitement in her voice that men who cared for her found difficult to forget. A singing compulsion. A whispered, "Listen." A promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since, and that there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. Okay, hear anything in that little passage that was striking? Like, that made you think symbolism?
Oh, I mean, she's just... The one thing I thought it was the sirens.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
So she has a voice that gives a singing compulsion.
Yeah.
So there is this pull that she has got, and it is hard to define. Mm-hmm. So,
but it's kind of in that 1920s, darling, I've no care in the world. That kind of flouncy girl. That's the Fitzgerald girl too. That's the Zelda. That's that kind of girl that. She would also be in a Hemingway novel, that kind of... Yeah. But I never thought about the siren before, but that's cool.
Yeah, so we have this little sort of siren thing. Keep that in your mind.
Okay, keep it in my mind.
And
where's my Odysseus? Tied to the ship mast.
Yeah. So just sort of keep that in your head. I'm going to try to kind of touch on little pieces of the symbolism that we're going to pull on later when we get to it. Hold on, I'm searching for a quote here. Okay. So there's that singing compulsion. They have this sort of lunch, and then they're sort of done. Nick decides to go hang out with Tom, and they drive. And I'm going to read you another small section. Let's see, page 31 quote. Okay, another quote about the voice. The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, again, compulsion, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and sure enough, in a moment she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society to which she and Tom belonged. So he sees through it kind of a little bit at one point, and it's just weird. It's this, like, the voice is her allure. Okay. They decide to go on a motor car ride. Tom, Nick, they sort of head out. And there's a small description about a place in the city that I kind of want to highlight. About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile so as to shrink away from a certain desolate area of land. This is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the form of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with the transcendent effort of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. Occasionally, a line of gray cars crawls along an invisible track, gives out a ghastly creak and comes to rest, and immediately the ash-gray men swarm up with leaden spades and stir up an impenetrable crowd which screens their obscure operations from your sight. But above the gray land and the spasms of bleak dust, which drift endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose. Evidently, some wild wag of an occultist set them there to fatten his practice on the borough of Queens, and then sank down himself into eternal blindness, or forgot them, and moved away. But his eyes, dimmed a little by many paintless days under sun and rain, brood on over the solemn dumping ground. Mm-hmm. I'll come back to those spectacles. I just wanted to give you the first hint.
So people know what they are. It's an advertisement.
It's an advertisement. Yeah. It's a big ad for Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's
Eyes of God on the
Yeah, exactly. I feel like you've read this before.
I've read Gatsby before.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, there's this sort of ash heap, and that will come in occasionally as they sort of blast from one party to another part of town where they're going for these dramatic, wonderful things. And it's just a reminder of sort of the refuse that comes from this kind of excess that they are living in. That there is an ash heap, and that all comes out of this same city. And somewhere there are the poor who are doing poor people things, and there's these giant eyes of God sort of looking down. Okay. On that little trip with Nick and Tom, they meet a woman named Myrtle Wilson at a gas station. He says hi to her husband. He's like, "Hey, how's it going on?" And then he walks up to her and says, "I have to see you. Get on the next train." So she hops on the train. They go out together.
Nick does. Oh, sorry, Tom does.
Yes, Tom says this.
So
not
this is
Nick.
his lover.
So this is his lover lady, right? He's doing, and this shows how easy he is with this kind of thing. Nick is in tow. Right. He has a friend there.
Yep.
And he goes up to this woman and says, "I have to see you." And they join the party. It's like, I have an affair and then I go out with my wife's second cousin.
Yeah, it's almost like Nick is not even
it's like he doesn't
acknowledged
exist.
as a solid person by these people.
Yeah, he doesn't really count. I maybe it's because he doesn't have a great pull in the, I don't know, in the society.
Or maybe everyone just sort of knows that Nick just doesn't, Nick
he doesn't
ultimately
talk.
is not going to pass judgment and doesn't care.
Yeah, or he's one of those guys who just doesn't chat. Mm-hmm. So she's not a great beauty, this woman, but she does have sort of an undeniable vitality about her. So they're kind of hanging out. She decides that she wants a dog, so they stop and they buy a puppy.
Isn't she dark-haired? Isn't she kind of like Italian-sounding?
I can read you her description. Then I heard footsteps on a stairs, and in a moment, the thickish figure of a woman blocked out the light from the office door. She was in the middle 30s and faintly stout, but she carried her surplus flesh sensuously, as some women can. Her face, above a spotted dress of dark blue crepe de chine, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediately perceptible vitality about her, as if the nerves of her body were continually smoldering. She smiled slowly and, walking through her husband as if he were a ghost, shook hands with Tom, looking him flush in the eye. Then she wet her lips and, without turning around, spoke to her husband in a soft, coarse voice. "Get some chairs, why don't you, so somebody can sit down." Her name is Wilson. I don't think she's Italian.
Maybe not, but maybe I don't know why I have this in my mind. But she's she's always described as this sort of like smoldering sex goddess, and then you've kind of got like wealthy, beautiful, but kind of pouty Daisy, and Daisy's sort of described as wispish.
Yes, like she's never really very clearly defined. She's beautiful. She's small. She's a little bit faint. She's delicate. It's her voice, and she seems to be a little girl playing all the time.
Very good, yeah, that's great. And then whereas this woman, she has a little more. Like he even said that she's sort of what was the word that she carries a little more weight, but she does it in a way that is like
sensuous,
but it's sensuous, and so there's some va-va-voom to her.
Yeah, you can imagine Daisy as sort of a forest sprite. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so they go and they fight over these friends. So Tom, this woman, Myrtle. And they decide to go to her, I think, sister's apartment and drink. And so they're sitting around. Maybe it's her apartment. And here's a little quote from that. "It was 9 o'clock. Almost immediately afterwards, I looked at my watch and found it was 10. Mr. McKee, a fellow at the party, was asleep on a chair with his fists clenched in his lap like a photograph of a man of action. Taking out my handkerchief, I wiped from his cheek the remains of the spot of dried lather that had been worrying me all afternoon. The little dog, which they'd purchased that day, was sitting on the table looking with blind eyes through the smoke and from time to time groaning faintly. People disappeared, reappeared, made plans to go somewhere, and then lost each other, searched for each other, found each other a few feet away. Sometime toward midnight, Tom Buchanan and Miss Wilson stood face to face discussing in impassioned tones whether Mrs. Wilson had any right to mention Daisy's name. "Daisy, Daisy, Daisy," shouted Mrs. Wilson. "I'll say it whenever I want to. Daisy, Daisy." And making a short, deft movement, Tom Buchanan broke her nose with his open hand. So Tom...
Not a great guy.
Is not opposed to violence.
Yeah, not great.
But weirdly enough, even though this is the woman he's sleeping with, he still holds a place for Daisy that is above these other women. Kind of.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
She's not allowed to talk about his wife, and if she does, and she won't shut up, I mean, they're all drunk, and that doesn't excuse the behavior, but he's not afraid of resorting to little bouts of violence. Yeah. So obviously this kind of thing seems to end for Tom, right? I don't think they maintain a relationship after that, or at least not much of one. Okay, so that's kind of chapter 2. A little while later, this fellow named Gatsby moves in next door to Nick.
The husband doesn't know about the affair between Myrtle, or whatever her name is, and Tom, right? Her husband doesn't know about it?
No, her husband has no idea this is happening. The guy that works at the garage, he loves his wife dutifully, has no idea she's been running around on him.
Gotcha.
He's described as not having very many friends, and he only has energy enough for her, and that's about it. The rest of the day, he sort of sits on a chair and watches the street go by. So she has this massive vitality. He doesn't have much vitality, and I think she spends it with who she can, especially Tom, who appears to have lots and lots of cash, while she doesn't really, right? She's sort of...
And he's this like hot-blooded former athlete, and
So this is where we sort of get introduced to Jay Gatsby. Jay Gatsby lives next to Nick, and he starts throwing parties all summer. These big, lavish, crazy, extravagant parties. He shows up at them like a benevolent god, but he doesn't seem to mix in them very much. It says the people show up and then exhibit the behavior as if they were at an amusement park, right? They just sort of go crazy. They're swimming in the ocean. They're in his library. They're all over the place, but he goes to extra care to take care of the people there. There's a girl who falls and rips her dress. A couple of days later, she gets a dress in the mail from Gatsby that's like a $3,000 dress in our money. Back then, it was like $80, right? But it's wildly expensive. And there are all these rumors about Jay because he doesn't really mingle as much as with everybody else. And so Nick has been invited. He tries to go find Gatsby. He
and
doesn't
no one knows
really
who he
night.
is. Like,
yeah, he just sort of showed up, bought the house, and started throwing parties.
Whereas, like, you meet Nick and like you realize, oh, you're one of those families, these wealthy East Coast families that goes back all the way to the Mayflower or whatever.
Right.
But Gatsby, no one knows who Gatsby is.
Yeah, no one knows who Gatsby is. He throws these summers kind of, he throws these parties kind of all summer long. People don't even really get invited to them. They just sort of show up at them, right? And so there's a big long thing sort of explaining all these parties. And then Jay eventually asks Nick to go on a drive. And so they're on the drive, and I'm going to read you a little conversation that seems to be hilarious. So he's sitting there, and they're just sort of driving in silence. And finally, Gatsby says, "Look here, old sport," he broke out surprisingly. "What's your opinion of me anyhow?" A little overwhelmed, I began the general evasions which that question deserves. "Well, I'm going to tell you something about my life," he interrupted. "I don't want you to get a wrong idea of me from all these stories you hear." So he was aware of the bizarre accusations that flavored conversation in his halls. "I'll tell you God's truth," his right hand suddenly ordered divine retribution to stand by. "I am the son of some wealthy people in the Middle West, all dead now. I was brought up in America but educated at Oxford because all my ancestors have been educated there for many years. It's a family tradition." He looked at me sideways, and I knew why Jordan Baker, his golfing girlfriend, had believed he was lying. He hurried the phrase "educated at Oxford," or swallowed it, or choked on it as though it had bothered him before. And with this doubt, his whole statement fell to pieces, and I wondered if there wasn't something a little sinister about him after all. "What part of the Middle West?" I inquired casually. "San Francisco," which
Is not.
It is in the middle of the West Coast, but no one would ever say it's the Midwest,
That's
right?
funny.
He goes, "I see. My family all died and I came into a good deal of money." Anyway, he gives this background of becoming like a young Raja in the capitals of Europe, in Venice, Paris, and Rome, collecting jewels and rubies and all of this stuff, and it's all very clearly not true at all.
Right.
We find out on this drive that he's got some weird, shady business connections. We meet a guy named Mr. Wolfsheim. I think it's Meyer Wolfsheim, who talks about business connections and doesn't really say much. And they kind of seem like they want Nick in on it, but Nick doesn't go for it. And the whole reason for this whole thing is Gatsby says, "Look, tonight you're going to talk with Jordan, your golfing girlfriend, and she is going to make a request of you." He can't even request it himself. It has to come from her.
Now, wait a second. This Wolfheim guy,
Wolfsheim. Yeah.
What's his first name?
Meyer.
So is Gatsby? I know we later on in the book we find out what his name was before he changed it.
Meyer Wolfsheim?
No, Jay Gatsby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Gatsby? I just was thinking. Is Gatsby Jewish?
I don't think so.
I can't remember. I thought, or is he? Because Meyer. It sounds like this guy's Jewish, Meyer Wolfsheim.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. But there's like this undertone that Gatsby, is somehow involved.
James Gatz.
James Gatz, Gatz.
Yeah.
And maybe there's somehow this undertone that Gatsby is somehow involved in either organized crime or like he made a bunch of money selling weapons, right, during the war.
Oh, Wolfsheim?
Something like that.
Wolfsheim's got all kinds of stuff. He fixed the World Series. He's a sketchy dude.
He's a sketchy dude, but I shouldn't jump ahead.
Because they don't say where the money comes
ahead,
from.
you're
But I
fine.
thought
I don't know that they say where Wolfsheim's money comes from. He just sort of vaguely hints at it. Gatsby, we find out his money is
does get it from
sketchy.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll find that out later.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna tell you guys.
Okay.
So we find out that it's this whole thing, and there's a request that's gonna come from his girlfriend that night. For some reason, it's weird. So Nick eventually talks with Jordan. He's half distracted because she's cute, and she kind of reveals that there was this young soldier that Daisy was with for a little while, and he very clearly loved her, and she very clearly loved him. And then he went off to war. She wanted her life to be fixed in some sort of solid way as quickly as possible, and hadn't heard from him. And then on the day of her wedding, she had gotten a letter from this young soldier, Jay Gatsby, and decided to call it off. She got wicked drunk and was like, "Tell him Daisy's changed your mind." And they take the letter, they convince her to go through with it, and then a couple hours later, she's solid as ever and goes through with this marriage and gets married to Tom.
Yep.
So she loved Gatsby at some point, five-ish years ago. And he went off to war, and then I think she maybe thought he was dead or had lost connection, but she got that letter, went through with the marriage anyway. And so it's clear that Mr. Gatsby wants to get to know Daisy again. And he asks for a meeting. He says, "Hey, Nick, can you set up a chance run-in between me and Daisy?" We find out he's been throwing these parties, all of these really lavish parties, just hoping that Daisy would sort of flop her way into the party and he would get to make some sort of chance connection or see her or something, but it's not working. Yeah. So he says, "Nick, you've got to invite her over, and you got to invite me over, and it's got to happen," right? There's another quote about her voice on page 52. Says the exhilarating ripple of her voice was a wild tonic in the rain. I had to follow the sound of it for a moment up and down with my ear alone before any words came through. So her voice is sort of this thing that comes back and back and back all the way through. Okay, so she sets up the thing. That's from the beginning of the meeting. And it's great because Gatsby's super nervous and she shows up, and then Nick takes Daisy into the meeting room and he's expecting that Gatsby will be there waiting for her. But he's not. And it says, with his hands still in his coat pockets, he stalked us. So she turned her head as there was a light, dignified knocking at the front door. I went out and opened it. Gatsby, pale as death, with his hands plunged like weights into his coat pockets, was standing in a puddle of water, glaring tragically into my eyes. So she had showed up. Gatsby was already in the house, but he decided he also needed to show up at the same time. So he ran out, came all the way around the house in the rain, soaked himself,
That's funny,
and then walked back in. And then, with his hands still in his coat pockets, he stalked by me into the hall, turned sharply as if he were on a wire, and disappeared into the living room. It wasn't a bit funny. It certainly sounds funny.
It does, yes.
Aware of the loud beating of my own heart, I pulled the door to against the increasing rain. For half a minute, there wasn't a sound. Then from the living room, I heard a sort of choking murmur and part of a laugh, followed by Daisy's voice on a clear artificial note. I certainly am awfully glad to see you again. A pause. It endured horribly. I had nothing to do in the hall, so I went into the room. Gatsby, his hands still in his pockets, was reclining against the mantelpiece in a strained counterfeit of perfect ease, even of boredom. His head leaned back so far that it rested against the face of a defunct mantelpiece clock, and from this position his distraught eyes stared down at Daisy, who was sitting frightened but graceful on the edge of a chair. We've met before, muttered Gatsby. His eyes glanced momentarily at me, and his lips parted with an abortive attempt at a laugh. Luckily, the clock took this moment to tilt dangerously at the pressure of his head, whereupon he turned and caught it with trembling fingers and set it back in place. Then he sat down rigidly, his elbow on the arm of the sofa, and his chin in his hand. I'm sorry about the clock, he said. My own face now assumed a deep tropical burn. I couldn't muster up a single commonplace out of 1,000 in my head. It's an old clock, I told him idiotically. I think we all believed for a moment that it had smashed to pieces on the floor.
Incredible.
So it's this
Incredible.
It's so awkward. If you watch the Great Gatsby movie, this scene is absolute gold because it's Leonardo DiCaprio and he knocks the clock down and it kind of does break and then he tries to jam a piece back in and breaks it further. It's so good. So there's this wicked, awkward meeting. And Nick steps out for a minute as the two get better acquainted, and she sort of admits her love for him, or at least we kind of surmise that. He comes back in, and they're both, smiling and feeling lovely, and they get a tour of his house. I know I'm kind of going slow through this, but the weird thing is there's not a whole lot of plot. Right. Like, not much actually happens. There's a lot of talking about feelings and emotions and sort of setting the scene and the tone, but as far as, like, real solid world events, there's not a lot. So they get a tour of the house. Jay Gatsby takes Daisy to show her his just shocking wealth. And he is wildly wealthy, right? He's got so much money. And he takes her into his place and ends up taking her into the closet and starts taking shirts out of his closet and throwing them on the couch.
Like she's going through the...
No, I think he does. Okay. He took out a pile of shirts and began throwing them one by one before us. So he is displaying his really nice
Clothes.
shirts.
Yeah.
Suddenly, with a strange sound, Daisy bent her head into the shirts and began to cry. They're such beautiful shirts, yes. She sobbed, her voice muffled in thick folds. It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before.
Cool.
It's really cute. And this is a part that people talk about maybe most from The Great Gatsby, is this green light. You guys know about the green light I'm talking about? This is where it's first introduced. If it wasn't for the mist, we could see your home across the bay, said Gatsby. You always have a green light that burns all night at the end of your dock. Daisy put her arm through his abruptly, but he seemed absorbed in what he had just said. Possibly it had occurred to him that the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. Compared to the great distance that had separated him from Daisy, it had seemed very near to her, almost touching her. It had seemed as close as a star to the moon. Now it was again a green light on a dock. His count of enchanted objects had diminished by one. So he couldn't get close to her, but the light was, so he would stare at it all night, and now that he actually had her, the light was meaningless. It was just a light again. Okay, Nick decides to leave because he wants to leave these two lovers, to chat things over. As I went over to say goodbye, I saw that the expression of bewilderment had come back into Gatsby's face, as though a faint doubt had occurred to him as to the quality of his present happiness. Almost 5 years. There must have been moments, even that afternoon, when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams. Not through her own fault, but because of the colossal vitality of his illusion. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. He'd thrown himself into it with a creative passion, adding to it all the time, decking it out with every bright feather that drifted his way. No amount of fire or freshness can challenge what a man will store up in his ghostly heart. As I watched him, he adjusted himself a little visibly. His hand took hold of hers, and he said something low, and she said something low in his ear. He turned toward her with a rush of emotion. I think that voice held him most with its fluctuating, feverish warmth, because it couldn't be overdreamed. That voice was a deathless song. They had forgotten me, but Daisy glanced up and held out her hand. Gatsby didn't know me now at all. I looked once more at them, and they looked back at me remotely, possessed by intense life. Then I went out of the room and down the marble steps into the rain, leaving them there together. So at this moment, we sort of see that Gatsby has built up this thing in his head that is perhaps even beyond the Daisy of real life. Right? He's got the actual Daisy, and he gets entranced by this light, again, feeling that enchanted objects has diminished by one, when really he's got the real flesh and blood person right there with him.
Right. So he's just, because that ends sounding hopeful, or like he's got the thing he wanted, but right before that, it sounds like disillusionment, right? Like,
yeah.
So I don't know if there's just this conflict of he's feeling both at the same time, maybe.
Yeah, and we get weird hints that he's doing this like weird stalkerish behavior, right?
Yeah.
He asks for a meeting, but not even through, like he can't even ask for it. He's throwing these parties. While they're there, he shows all these newspaper clippings he's kept of her for years and years and years, which might feel romantic when you're young. When you're a little bit older, it feels a little bit weird.
Feels weird.
Strange.
Little bit weird.
Daisy is she's the golden-haired woman, right? He's put all of his like heart's ambition and desire and wanting to make something of himself into this person, and now he's got this person, and it's this mixture of ecstatic joy that she's on his arm, and also like, oh, really? She's just like a regular person.
She's crying at his shirts.
Yeah,
like it's and obviously that's not what she's crying about,
yes,
right? There's sort of this overrush of emotion, and she just can't hold it in. And finally, she just cries.
But it's also this like old money, new money thing going on. Like Gatsby was the poor soldier, and now he's coming with this new money. And he's never, you're never really going to be accepted into the old money world when you're this new money person. And she is. She's the establishment, and he's this upstart. And anyway, but all of that it's set, poor Daisy, right? Like having to shoulder like all of that desire, all of that like mimetic desire of somebody else is like built up in you as a person. I mean, she gets completely overshadowed as a person. She's not a real person to Gatsby. She's the object.
Yeah,
of desire.
And right after this is when they reveal who Jay Gatsby really is. Mm-hmm. His real name is James Gatz. He does have family. We find out later. He is not alone in this world.
From like Dakota or something, North Dakota.
He's from I think South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yeah. Let's see. It's one of the Dakotas. Anyway, he's from North Dakota. James Gatz of North Dakota.
The least blue-blooded place in America, right? Like
yeah, he really is from like the Midwest, but not San Francisco. Yeah. Certainly not. And we find out he was a young, poor kid and absolutely enamored of wonderful, beautiful things. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a quote on page. Sorry, page doesn't matter, but there's a quote that says, "For a while, he would just dream of these crazy things, fantastic conceits." A universe of ineffable gaudiness spun itself out in his brain while the clock ticked on the washstand in the moon. So he's just laying in bed dreaming of these wonderful things while he works menial jobs. And it says, for a while, these reveries provided an outlet for his imagination. They were a satisfactory hint of the unreality of reality, a promise that the rock of this world was founded securely on a fairy's wing. He wants these wonderful things, doesn't know how to get them. Luckily, he meets a guy named Dan Cody. And Dan Cody drives a yacht. He's got crazy money from some efforts in mining silver and gold, and he's so rich that he just sort of sails around the continent on this fancy boat that he's got. By chance, he drops anchor in Jay Gatsby's Bay, James Gatz, who he was, and as soon as James Gatz climbed on the deck, he introduced himself as Jay Gatsby. He already had this person in his mind that he could run with. The name sounds nicer, it sounds fancier, it sounds more old money than James Gatz. Mm-hmm. So he gives this name. Dan Cody recognizes that he's quick, he's smart, he's good looking, and he's ambitious. So he keeps him around. And after Dan Cody dies, he even leaves some money to him, but there's a woman who got her claws into Dan Cody before he died, so Jay Gatsby's cheated out of all of it. He eventually goes to World War I, Comes back decorated. He really did some good things. He quickly rose to, I think it was a major, was put in charge of the machine gun battalion, earned a few medals in the war, but came back penniless. Found out Daisy was attached, sort of hovered in her aura for a long time, and then get attached to this Meyer Wolfsheim guy who hooked him up with some sketchy money. We find out, and I'm not sure I wrote this down anywhere, but we find out later that what he did was together they bought a bunch of tiny drugstores and then started selling bootlegged liquor out of them. So grain alcohol. That's how they made their money.
Gotcha.
Or at least that's how they started making money. Now they've got some nebulous thing that's kind of dark and nobody talks about, but they're making even more money. So there's all this stuff. At one point, Jay even tries to get Nick in on it. He says, hey, I've got a thing. You might be interested. You can make a good bit of money doing it. And Nick, of course, doesn't need it. He just goes, no, thanks. Yeah. Like, isn't even tempted like any kid at that time, we're coming up on the Great Depression here. Any kid of that time would have been eager to make some cash.
But there was easy money to be made. This was like a massive boom in America. But Nick doesn't need it because Nick's comes from money.
He's already set. He doesn't need it. So, when you're already got 12 pillowcases of gold at home, somebody offers you a handful of gold.
Well, and also it's like, why go to crime when you have all the connections to go into banking or to go into bonds or whatever he wants to get into? Like, why?
Yeah, he's a bond.
Why
he's
take a risk?
Salesman,
why take
right?
that risk when you can go and like be a legitimate gangster?
Right. There it is.
Okay. Later in this scene, after we're finding out about all this stuff, he invites her to a party, Daisy. And Daisy does not really like the party. She doesn't really have a good time. It feels kind of gaudy. It's not really great. The parties were never really great. And I think seeing her reaction to it...
Well, there are these bacchanalian things, right?
Yeah, there are these big crazy parties. And she doesn't really have a good time. And Jay and Mr. Gatsby feels awful about it. He all of a sudden sees everything in a new light. And this will be the last party he throws. It's the last one. He doesn't do it again. And I'm going to read this little quote because it's really kind of revelatory of what's happening in Jay Gatsby's mind as he's dealing with Daisy. Sorry, I'm kind of taking a while to get us there. I hope that's all right. I stayed late that night. Gatsby asked me to wait until he was free, and I lingered in the garden until the inevitable swimming party had run up, chilled and exalted from the black beach, until the lights were extinguished in the guest rooms overhead. When he came down the steps, at last, the tan skin was drawn unusually tight on his face, and his eyes were bright and tired. She didn't like it, he said immediately. Well, of course she did. She didn't like it, he insisted. She didn't have a good time. He was silent, and I guessed at his unutterable depression. I feel far away from her, he said. It's hard to make her understand. You mean about the dance? The dance? He dismissed all the dances he had given with a snap of his fingers. Old sport, the dance is unimportant. He wanted nothing less of Daisy than that she should go to Tom and say, I never loved you. After she had obliterated 3 years with that sentence, they could decide upon the more practical measures to be taken. One of them was that after she was free, they were to go back to Louisville and be married from her house, just as if it were 5 years ago. And she doesn't understand, he said despairingly. She used to be able to understand. We'd sit for hours. He broke off and began to walk up and down a desolate path of fruit rinds and discarded favors and crushed flowers. I wouldn't ask too much of her, I ventured. You can't repeat the past. Can't repeat the past, he cried incredulously. Why, of course you can. He looked around him wildly, as if the past were lurking here in the shadow of his house, just out of reach of his hand. I'm going to fix everything just the way it was before, he said, nodding determinedly. She'll see. He talked a lot about the past, and I gathered that he wanted to recover something. Some idea of himself, perhaps, that she had gone into loving Daisy. His life had been confused and disordered since then, but if he could once return to a certain starting place and go over it all slowly, he could find out what that thing was. And then there's a little ellipses. One autumn night, 5 years ago, they'd been walking down the street when the leaves were falling, and they came to a place where there were no trees, and the sidewalk was white with moonlight. They stopped here and turned to each other. Now it was a cool night, with that mysterious excitement in it which comes at the two changes of the year. The quiet lights of the houses were humming out into the darkness, and there was a stir and bustle among the stars. Out of the corner of his eye, Gatsby saw that the blocks of the sidewalk really formed a ladder and mounted to a secret place above the trees. He could climb to it if he climbed alone, and once there he could suck on the pap of life, gulp down the incomparable milk of wonder. His heart beat faster and faster as Daisy's white face came up to his own. He knew that when he kissed this girl, and forever wed his unutterable visions to her perishable breath, his mind would never romp again like the mind of God. So he waited, listening for a moment longer to the tuning fork that had been struck upon a star. Then he kissed her. At his lips' touch, she blossomed for him like a flower, and the incarnation was complete. Through all she said, even through his appalling sentimentality, I was reminded of something, an elusive rhythm, a fragment of lost words that I had heard somewhere a long time ago. For a moment, a phrase tried to take shape in my mouth, and my lips parted like a dumb man's, as though there were more struggling upon them than a wisp of startled air. But they made no sound, and what I'd almost remembered was uncommunicable forever. All right, that's a weird passage. What did you guys get from that?
Rich girls, man. Rich girls.
Sure.
You want to say anything more?
No, like, the thing that I always reflect on with Gatsby is you have the idea and you have the reality. You have the idea of what Daisy is and what he wants her to be, and it's everything about his insecurity and his desire to be great and his desire to be ushered into high society and to be rich and to be successful and all this kind of stuff and to be unashamed. Like, he's super, like, he doesn't want to talk about where he gets his dirty money. He's ashamed of his like foreign immigrant sounding German name, and he just wants to be in this. And for him, Daisy is, if Daisy loves him, he's done it. And then on the other hand, there's the reality. You have this like real person of Daisy, and she has her own desires, and she has like kind of life that she wants to live. She has the own pressures that are on her. And like marrying Tom Buchanan is the script, is the thing that you should be doing. And he's the athlete, and he's the All-American, and you can live this life of wealth and like buy your bonds and drink your champagne but then she's also got her heart, and then there's Jay, but anyway, but Gatsby doesn't even realize this about Daisy. Like, it's not this relationship of equals who are wanting to like forge a life together. It's not a Darcy and Elizabeth, right? These two people that, even though there's a class discrepancy, they're a relationship of equals. It's that Daisy's been symbolized, diminished by Jay into a symbol, and then she's getting wrecked. And the thing is, that's probably like Daisy's curse. Tom's probably done it. She's the woman I'm supposed to marry. She's the jewel that you're supposed to get. And then he can go off and have his like, what he really wants, which is just like, passionate lovemaking with some like, smoldering woman. And that Daisy's not going to give him that.
Yeah, he wants some tumult.
Yeah.
Right? He wants passion and craziness. Daisy's not. Yeah, Daisy's not going to give him that.
And so the poor girl, she's just like, she's object. She is object for the men around her. And no wonder she cries.
But Tom seems to treat most women like objects.
Yeah. But Gatsby's doing it too.
Yeah, and he idolizes her a little more. But here's where the bit about the voice comes in fully. So right after that scene, they're all kind of hanging out. And she's been spending a lot of time at Gatsby's in the mornings. Tom kind of doesn't like this. He kind of starts to kind of key into what's going on here, and it's looking kind of weird, and he starts to investigate Gatsby. He's like, I don't really know what's happening, not really into it, but they're all hanging out one hot day. Nick, Jordan, Gatsby, Tom, and Daisy. And it's really hot, and they all decide to go to town. And Tom says, I don't see the idea of going to town, broke out Tom savagely. Women get these notions into their heads. Shall we take anything to drink? Called Daisy from an upper window. I'll get some whiskey, answered Tom. He went inside. Gatsby turned to me rigidly. I can't say anything in his house, old sport. She's got an indiscreet voice, I remarked. It's full of, I hesitated. Her voice is full of money, he said suddenly. That's it. I'd never understood before. It was full of money. That was the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it, the jingle of it, the cymbal song of it. High in a white palace, the king's daughter, the golden girl. So her voice was, yes, it is her siren quality. But that quality is cash.
Yeah.
She's got lots of it. Yes, she can always promise a wonderful thing to come.
It's not just like she's rich. It's everything that money can do. It's the optionality. It's the promise. It's the freedom. It's the fun.
It's the
fun.
Yeah.
It's the
cool rooms
excitement.
upstairs.
It is
it's
the
like
desire.
We could travel at any moment.
Yeah.
We could go do whatever we want to do. All of those things.
Yeah.
It is the life of if you just think it and will it, you have it.
Yeah.
That's who Daisy. That's like what Daisy sent. That's what her voice can promise you.
Yeah. So that is that little thread running all the way through.
Yeah.
That what Daisy has, her desirable quality, that siren song, is money. That's the thing that Gatsby, like that is the thing that captured him. And I'm going to read a section in a minute that actually kind of better sort of exhibits that little piece. How much time do I got? Ooh, some time. So yeah, this is kind of the thing that captured Gatsby in the first place, and it seems to be the thing that continuously gets him. And what's crazy is that this comes directly from his mouth. He said, she's got money. That's the thing that's in her voice, right? All right, so they go to town. And this is the part I printed out for you guys to read with me. They go to town, and they kind of stop at the gas station where the Wilsons are, and it's kind of awkward and not great. And they go downtown, and they're trying to decide what they're going to do with themselves, but alas, they can't think of anything to do except to rent a room to drink in. So they go to a hotel, rent a room. Like, man, so this is what they decide to. We're going to start on page 115. You guys see the little star there? Yeah, there's a couple on yours, I think, where I highlighted and then crossed it out because it's not actually you, if you look out for those X's.
Oh, the X's mean it's not actually me.
That means I screwed up. That's not actually you. So don't read those.
Do I have to read all this?
Yeah.
Tom is not a very nice person.
Tom is not a very nice person. There are
switch?
some swears here, so just a heads up.
Who swears?
Their bees?
Does Tom swear more? Wait, who are you reading for?
He just says the darn word, D-A-M-N. So if you're listening with kids, now might be a time to fast forward a little bit.
He has an unfortunate comment about intermarriage in the first section, but
yeah, we'll highlight that.
cool.
Okay, you guys ready?
Oh, yes.
Okay, let's go. So they're all drinking, and then Tom says, wait a minute, I want to ask Mr. Gatsby one more question. So we'll take it from go on.
Go on.
Gatsby said politely.
What kind of a row are you trying to cause in my house anyhow?
They were out in the open at last, and Gatsby was content. He isn't causing a row. Daisy looked desperately from one to the other. You're causing a row. Please have a little self-control.
Self-control?
Repeated Tom incredulously.
I suppose the latest thing is to sit back and let Mr. Nobody from Nowhere make love to your wife. Well, if that's the idea, you can count me out. Nowadays, people begin by sneering at family life and family institutions, and next they'll throw everything overboard and have intermarriage between black and white.
Okay, not great, first
Not
of all.
great.
Written in the
Yeah,
20s.
not great.
Second, isn't this a little bit ironic?
Because Tom is cheating on
Because
Daisy.
Tom
Yeah,
is
for sure.
cheating and
Yeah.
sneering at family institutions.
Yep.
So he doesn't even see the irony of his own words. And what's more, it's not highlighted in the book. This is one great thing about the Great Gatsby novel is that it does a really good job of not drawing connections for you. It'll hint at things and supply sort of what's happening, but you have to make all these connections for yourself. It respects the reader and trusts you to do a lot. And the prose is totally beautiful. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that that's total irony coming from Tom,
for sure.
right?
Yeah.
Flushed with his impassioned gibberish, he saw himself standing alone on the last barrier of civilization. We're all white here, murmured Jordan.
I know I'm not very popular. I don't give big parties. I suppose you've got to make your house into a pigsty in order to have any friends in the modern world.
Angry as I was, as we all were, I was tempted to laugh whenever he opened his mouth. The transition from libertine to prig was so complete.
I've got something to tell you, old sport.
Began Gatsby, but Daisy guessed at his intention. Please don't, she interrupted helplessly. Please, let's all go home. Why don't we all go home? That's a good idea. I got up. Come on, Tom. Nobody wants a drink.
I want to know what Mr. Gatsby has to tell me.
Your wife doesn't love you.
Said Gatsby quietly.
She's never loved you. She loves me.
You must be crazy!
Exclaimed Tom automatically. Gatsby sprang to his feet, vivid with excitement.
She never loved you, do you hear?
He cried.
She only married you because I was poor and she was tired of waiting for me. It was a terrible mistake, but in her heart, she never loved anyone except me.
At this point, Jordan and I tried to go, but Tom and Gatsby insisted with competitive firmness that we remain, as though neither of them had anything to conceal, and it would be a privilege to partake vicariously of their emotions.
Sit down, Daisy.
Tom's voice groped unsuccessfully for the paternal note.
What's been going on? I want to hear all about it.
I told you what's been going on.
Said Gatsby.
Going on for 5 years and you didn't know.
Tom turned to Daisy sharply.
You've been seeing this fellow for 5 years?
Not seeing.
Said Gatsby.
No, we couldn't meet. But both of us loved each other all that time, old sport, and you didn't know. I used to laugh sometimes.
But there was no laughter in his eyes.
To think that you didn't know.
Oh, that's all.
Tom tapped his thick fingers together like a clergyman and leaned back in his chair.
You're crazy.
He exploded.
I can't speak about what happened 5 years ago because I didn't know Daisy then. And I'll be damned if I see how you got within a mile of her unless you brought the groceries to the back door. But all the rest of that's a goddamned lie. Daisy loved me when she married me, and she loves me now.
No,
said Gatsby, shaking his head.
She does, though. The trouble is that sometimes she gets foolish ideas in her head and doesn't know what she's doing.
He nodded sagely.
And what's more, I love Daisy too. Once in a while, I go off on a spree and make a fool of myself, but I always come back. And in my heart, I love her all the time.
You're revolting, said Daisy. She turned to me and in her voice, dropping an octave lower, filled the room with thrilling scorn. Do you know why we left Chicago? I'm surprised they didn't treat you to the story of that little spree. Gatsby walked over and stood beside her.
Daisy, that's all over now.
He said earnestly.
It doesn't matter anymore. Just tell him the truth. That you've never loved him. And it's all wiped out forever.
She looked at him blindly. Why, how could I love him, possibly?
You never loved him.
She hesitated. Her eyes fell on Jordan and me with a sort of appeal, as though she realized at last what she was doing, and as though she had never all along intended doing anything at all. But it was done now. It was too late. I never loved him, she said with perceptible reluctance.
Not at Kapiolani?
Demanded Tom. It's just such a rich sounding place.
Yeah, right.
Demanded Tom suddenly. No. From the ballroom beneath, muffled and suffocating chords were drifting up on hot waves of air.
Not that day I carried you down from the punch bowl to keep your shoes dry?
There was a husky tenderness in his tone.
Daisy?
Please don't. Her voice was cold, but the rancor was gone from it. She looked at Gatsby. There, Jay, she said, but her hand, as she tried to light a cigarette, was trembling. Suddenly she threw the cigarette and burning match on the carpet. Oh, you want too much, she cried to Gatsby. I love you now. Isn't that enough? I can't help what's past. She began to sob helplessly. I did love him once, but I loved you too. Gatsby's eyes opened and closed.
You loved me too?
He repeated.
Even that's a lie,
said Tom savagely.
She didn't know you were alive. Why, there's things between Daisy and me that you'll never know. Things that neither of us can ever forget.
The words seemed to bite physically into Gatsby.
I want to speak Daisy alone.
He insisted.
She's all excited now.
Even alone, I can't say I never left Tom, she admitted in a pitiful voice. It wouldn't be true.
Of course it wouldn't,
agreed Tom. She turned to her husband. As if it mattered to you, she said.
Of course it matters. I'm going to take better care of you from now on.
You don't understand,
said Gatsby with a touch of panic.
You're not going to take care of her anymore.
I'm not?
Tom opened his eyes wide and laughed. He could afford to control himself now.
Why's that?
Daisy's leaving you.
Nonsense.
I am, though, she said with visible effort.
She's not leaving me.
Tom's words suddenly leaned down over Gatsby.
Certainly not for a common swindler who'd have to steal the ring he put on her finger.
I won't stand this, cried Daisy. Oh, please, let's go out.
Who are you anyhow?
Broke out Tom.
You're one of that bunch that hangs around with Meyer Wolfsheim. That much I happen to know. I've made a little investigation into your affairs, and I'll carry it further tomorrow.
You can suit yourself about that, old sport,
said Gatsby steadily.
I found out what your drugstores were.
He turned to us and spoke rapidly.
He and this Wolfsheim bought up a lot of side street drugstores here and in Chicago and sold grain alcohol over the counter. That's one of his little stunts. I picked him for a bootlegger the first time I saw him, and I wasn't far wrong.
What about it?
Said Gatsby politely.
I guess your friend Walter Chase wasn't too proud to come in on it.
And you left him in the lurch, didn't you? You let him go to jail for a month over in New Jersey. God, you ought to hear Walter on the subject of you.
He came to us dead broke. He was very glad to pick up some money, old sport.
Don't you call me old sport,
cried Tom. Gatsby said nothing.
Walter could have you up on the betting laws too, but Wolfsheim scared him into shutting his mouth.
That unfamiliar yet recognizable look was back again in Gatsby's face.
That drugstore business was just small change,
continued Tom slowly.
But you've got something on now that Walter's afraid to tell me about.
I glanced at Daisy, who was staring terrified between Gatsby and her husband, and at Jordan, who had begun to balance an invisible but absorbing object on the tip of her chin. Then I turned back to Gatsby and was startled at his expression. He looked, and this is said in all contempt for the babbled slander of his garden, as if he had killed a man. For a moment, the set of his face could be described in just that fantastic way. It passed, and he began to talk excitedly to Daisy, denying everything, defending his name against accusations that had not been made. But with every word, she was drawing further and further into herself, so he gave that up, and only the dead dream fought on as the afternoon slipped away, trying to touch what was no longer tangible, struggling unhappily, undespairingly toward that lost voice across the room. The voice begged again to go. Please, Tom, I can't stand this anymore. Her frightened eyes told that whatever intentions, whatever courage she had had, were definitely gone.
You two start on home, Daisy,
said Tom.
In Mr. Gatsby's car.
She looked at Tom, alarmed now, but he insisted with magnanimous scorn.
Go on. He won't annoy you. I think he realizes that his presumptuous little flirtation is over.
Okay, I think we can probably stop there.
Yeah.
This is, I think...
Like it ruins the affair. Like,
yep,
yeah,
it's over.
It breaks the illusion, right?
He even has the moxie to tell them to drive together back to his house. Right. You can ride with Gatsby. Like, man, what a power move. Yeah. I also love the basic comedy of this, like the old sport. And there's just so much silliness because they're all a little bit half drunk. And it's, I don't know. This is a pretty hard scene. I'm wondering if I should talk about what happens right after this. I think I'll leave that bit up to our reader. This I won't spoil it for you, but there's...
You aren't talking about the ending?
Yeah, you have to.
I'm going to talk about the very, very... you think?
Like it's set up by what happens next. Right?
All right, fine. Yeah. All right, so what happens is on the way back, we find out that Gatsby lets Daisy drive, and as they pass, seeing Tom Buchanan's car, the woman, Myrtle, at the gas station runs out to talk to him because she
thinks it's Buchanan's car.
She thinks it's Tom.
Yeah.
So Daisy tries to swerve away from her, and then at the last second, wusses out because there's another car there, and she actually hits Myrtle and kills her. The car pauses for a moment and then drives on. So Daisy can't handle it. She panics. She drives away. Gatsby says he will always claim that it was him. Tom, of course, drives home.
Wait, why is Myrtle wanting to come out to talk to Buchanan?
Because it's Tom.
It's Tom. And he's broken her nose, and I think she misses with it because she's with her husband now, and it was a drunken fight they had, and this whole thing.
Gotcha.
Anyway, on the way back, Tom stops in at the gas station, sees the body, tries to comfort the husband, basically says, it wasn't me, I wasn't driving the car, I'm in a different car, we just came from New York. Anyway, the husband has a horrible night. The next morning, he kind of disappears for a little while, and then as Jay Gatsby sort of waits for the hammer to fall, he decides to go swimming and use his pool for the first time ever that summer. He hasn't at all. And as he's swimming, Mr. Wilson comes up and shoots him and then shoots himself. Mm-hmm. So Jay dies in his swimming pool, which back then was a pretty amazing thing to have and definitely a symbol of wealth. And so he dies sort of in this wealth, which is funny.
Symbol of America, man. Yeah. Your own private pool.
That's the great thing. There was a kid in class, says Catherine, that as they were coming up on it, she's like, yeah, we're going to read The Great Gatsby. He goes, isn't that the one about how the American dream leaves you dead in your pool? She's like, shut up. Because he was kind of giving it away.
Yeah.
But yes, it is.
So, yeah, he dies in his pool, and that's awfully tragic. Gatsby, right when they had arrived home from that whole...
Dude's a criminal.
Right when they, we'll talk about it in a sec. Right when they arrived home from that tragic night, Gatsby was afraid that Tom would hit her or something, so he sort of stands out in the bushes all evening. But what's really happening is Daisy and Tom are coolly discussing what they're going to do next over beer and chicken that they don't touch. They talk. It's old money conspiring. It makes that clear. He's like, what, Gatsby would have seen if he looked through the window was old money calmly, machinating and figuring out what they're going to do. So... they disappear. They go on a trip. And
patch it up.
Gatsby dies. Nick has trouble getting anybody to come to his funeral. Wolfsheim won't come. He can't get mixed up in a guy who got killed. Yeah. None of the partygoers come. The only guy that shows up is this random boarder who is sort of in Jay Gatsby's house just hanging out, doing push-ups. He was like just some random guy living there. Yeah. He showed up and he said, he deserved more than this, right, for people to actually come. My theory is that's Fitzgerald. I think that's the author.
Why?
I think he's hanging out in the house.
Is there any connection between them?
Because that's what I would do if I was the author. I would put somebody in there cameo. To be me. Yeah. And the other great thing, and I'll touch on this really quickly before I sort of read the end, is that Fitzgerald wrote on this because he lived it. He loved a woman when he was young that was rich, and the family basically said, no, you don't have money. And poor little boys shouldn't try to marry rich girls. The second girl he was into, they were engaged for a little while, and then because he could not seem to get a job that made enough money, she basically said, when you are financially okay, and you can support this lifestyle that I'm used to, we can get married. And he couldn't do it. So she broke off the engagement. And then he wrote his first book. It became a success. And then
He hit her up?
He hit her up, and they did get re-engaged and eventually got married. But even then...
Is that Zelda?
Yeah.
Oh.
Even then, at the height of their like coming back together, he said, I have no feelings for her. Like, I wouldn't care if she died. They had a tumultuous relationship. They were part of the Ernest Hemingway crowd and had all this money and did all this drinking. And he did not hold his liquor well. Neither of them do. They started accusing each other of infidelity. She may have had schizophrenia, like all this stuff. He had a really hard life. But Jay Gatsby's story is almost the story about Fitzgerald's love of this woman in his early years, right? This first woman that he really wanted and couldn't have, right? He writes about it because he lived it. But I still think the border was Fitzgerald sort of being in the story and attending the funeral and all that stuff. I'm going to read the glasses I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to go back and read it, but there's a point where Mr. Wilson takes his wife when he finds out that she's been running around on him and forces her to look out upon the ash heaps and the glasses. And he says, look, God is always watching. And so these glasses become sort of the symbol for the eyes of God, which are looking over the ash heaps and the poor, but also aren't doing anything, right? They don't solve the problems. They're there present in these important times, but they don't do much. And even then there's a little comedy thrown in because the guy that's standing there that Mr. Wilson's telling the story to, he goes, yeah, but those are just an advertisement. He just points it out. But there's a little bit of symbolism there. I wanted to read the very last page, sort of as a goodbye. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Yep, it's time. Okay. So last page. Fitzgerald has noted, or Nick has noted, that all of the main characters are Westerners and not really Easterners, right? That they might have this thing in them that's not accustomed to
you mean the eggs, the West egg, East egg? Is that?
No, that they are Western United States. They're not native Easterners. Yeah. So he says, most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy moving glow of a ferry boat across the sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes. A fresh, green breast of the New World. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commensurate to the capacity for wonder. And as I sat there brooding on the unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eludes us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we'll run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. So Gatsby, yes, he set up Daisy as this effigy of all the things that he desired. At the very end, it may become a commentary upon how we in the United States have, we had this new world. We had this thing that was commensurate to our capacity for wonder, this thing that we wanted, and our country was born on the promise of the West. Now we don't have it anymore. That's gone. So there's something in us that still yearns on for this, purposeful adventure, this something that is commensurate with our capacity for wonder. And we rush towards it when all the time it's behind us. It even talks about the Republic, right? That's thrown in when it's talking about Gatsby's desires. So Gatsby becomes sort of the symbol for America, right? We want this thing that in our heads sounds so awesome, but it's not there anymore. It's certainly not going to deliver on the promise. Gatsby had what Donaldson would have called a moment of great joy. That's what happened on that sidewalk. He tasted that. And then it became incarnated in Daisy, right? The incarnation was complete. That whole feeling, that possibility, all those riches, all those things that he wanted became embodied in her, and he couldn't have it any other way. He wanted her or nothing else. And what's weird is once it's gone, once it's done, he's in his swimming pool and he's looking around and everything has lost that dreamlike quality. It's just material, and I think it seemed grotesque. Anyway, that's sort of everything that is happening for me in Great Gatsby, which is cool.
Do we have time, or do we have to go the in-between?
I think
we're at an hour, but
I was just going to say, to me, I think that makes sense. I always see Gatsby as this not a cautionary tale, but human beings, and maybe it's more of a masculine thing, because we definitely have this like sort of these competing, like Tom and Jay fighting over Daisy, but there's this like everybody has this desire that is sort of driving them and motivating them to do something, and everybody needs to get to the place where they can temper and control it.
Or debunk it, maybe?
Or maybe it's debunk it, but it's like if you let it be, it's almost like if you let that animal side of you, the thing that wants, if you let that take control, like there's no stopping it once it gets going. And then the reality is like its hunger is so much more than the actual things that you get. Like the things that sort of symbolize what it wants, once it has, it's not enough. Like once you have Daisy, it's not going to be enough. And he's like, Jay doesn't just, when Daisy says, isn't it enough that I say I love you right now? And Jay's like, no. You have to have loved me all the time, forever and ever. And that's the only acceptable thing. Daisy's like, can't do that. That's not real.
Right.
And that breaks it for Jay. Like Jay Gatsby he's given himself completely over to that desire. This is even going back like Brené Girard, right? Like that mimetic desire. You're driven by that thing that you think other people have, and that animates you. So everybody needs to get to the place where they can like temper it, or they can sever the desire from growing further. It's almost like you can't let it, continue to create roots and spread throughout the entire yard, right? Like you need to contain it at some point, or you're going to end up dead in your swimming pool. Like you can't let it run you. It's almost, you turn it almost into this like animal version of yourself, or the whole thing, you lose control. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I always remember when I read Gatsby is like, as the book goes on, it's got this big veneer of everything being sort of like fun and happy, but as it goes on, it's just like there's this big bottoming out where the whole thing loses control, and and they're just like getting drunk in a hotel room, and
then they have some sort of fight about
big old fight.
Daisy didn't really intend to do anything.
People
in the first
are getting
place.
run over. Tragic things are happening, and you can't even deal with the present tragic thing because of the most previous tragic thing that's just happened in your own life. So you keep driving, and it's just like the whole thing is.
And even then, Daisy and Tom are untouchable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
They disappear.
That to me, yeah. And at the end, they're having this cool little conversation about like, all right, how do we manage this? How do we deal with this? Like, how are we going to be able to keep our relationship in whatever it is, and for whatever reason it exists? How are we going to keep this going? They're going to go on like a fancy trip. And like, of course, she's not going to leave Buchanan.
No, she's definitely not going to leave Buchanan. Partially, I think there's some weird narcissistic abuse happening there. Tom is clearly not a great guy.
But of course, he's also like the guy you marry. If you're the wealthy girl from like the southern, like you marry Tom Buchanan. He's the guy you marry.
Yeah.
And you
don't marry a guy
and you manage his philandering somehow.
And I think when she found out that Gatsby had earned all his money through dark means, of course she can no longer marry him. She cannot run away with him. She cannot have that dogging her heels. Yeah. Like I think for her, the illusion is
you're going to show up at a party and people are going to be like, that's Daisy. She's from this old money family, and she's with Gatsby.
A bootlegger.
A criminal. A guy who's made his money from like, crypto. Or whatever, right? Like it's got that. Yeah. It's got that.
It's got a mark on it.
It's got a mark on it.
She can't have that mark, and so now I think that illusion for her has broken.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's such a great book. But,
the prose, and just as a note, it's beautiful. The book is gorgeous. He does such a good job of following a couple of the rules of style that I'm cooking up a podcast on for the next few episodes, and he is incredibly good at writing. So you should read it. It's a fantastic book. Recommend it without reservation.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find us online at classicalstuff.net. You can find us on x.com at cliscalstuff, CLSSCAL stuff. You can email us, the guys, at classicalstuff.net. And you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/classicalstuff, where we have in-between episodes. We're going to record one of those right now where we'll keep the conversation going. We also have monthly AMAs and some other bonus content. So check that out. And again, thank you all for listening. Bye.
Bye.